Welcome back, everyone. It's EvanHusa57 here. I am back on Neverwinter on the Xbox One, and today I will be discussing the pros and cons between two enchantments, the Bile Thorn versus the Vorpal. Krogan has been kind enough to lend me these enchantments to test, and it's going to be a bit of a toss-up, so I'll be explaining the two enchantments as we run through the dungeon. Now, I'm in FBI, and I am testing this primarily focused on the Control Wizard, but this will be different depending upon the group that you run with. So, right now, in the AoE portion of the dungeon, I am actually using Lightning, and that is clearly, hands down, for the Wizard right now, the best enchantment. I have tried Vorpal, I have tried the Bile Thorn, I have tried my Dread, and the one that consistently gives me the most damage output is actually the Lightning. Now, that's not why we're here today. You already see me do a video about the Lightning versus the Dread. So, what I am here to talk about is the Transcendent Vorpal versus the Transcendent Bile Thorn. Now, assuming that you have high crit, one would initially think that the Vorpal would be hands down more beneficial than the Bile Thorn. However, that is not exactly the case. I'll go through and explain when we actually get to the first boss fight and show you the difference in the damage, but for the most part, I am increasing my damage only switching enchantments, keeping the same classes, the same team comp, same players and everything on every run, same potions, not changing anything to try and keep things as similar as possible between runs. And I gain an additional 10% damage on average in the single target boss fights by switching to the Bile Thorn enchantment over my Lightning enchantment. The Lightning is basically what I use to have a baseline, since that's the enchantment that I have on all the time. Now, with that being said, I've also tested Vorpal, and Vorpal seems to give me about the same 10% damage bonus, roughly. What I'm trying to figure out, and trying to either prove or disprove, is which enchantment in and of itself is best. Now, the Vorpal, of course, gives you the increased crit severity, which is very, very nice, especially if you already have a very high crit chance, or a high crit build from buffs or whatever, like I do. With that being said, though, the Bile Thorn is a power scaling enchantment, just like the Lightning. So the more power that you have, and the more power that you are being buffed to have, the more the Bile Thorn will increase your damage. In short, so far I have run into about a 10% bonus over the Lightning enchantment using the Bile Thorn, and about a 10% damage bonus over the Lightning using the Vorpal in single target. Vorpal versus Lightning seems to be about the same. Now, this is the one annoying part, because you actually do have to go in and change your enchantment. I don't have these loaded on a different set of weapons, so I will go ahead and remove the Lightning, add the Vorpal, which is going to help me with crit, and let me just put on my two single target powers, and we'll take a look at how much damage I have dealt, just to give a baseline. I have dealt so far 93 million. And this is a super buff group. So you can see, like, out of combat, my power is buffing that enchantment, the Bile Thorn enchantment, up to 75%. And Vorpal isn't buffed off of your power. Vorpal is just straight crit. It's just a straight crit bonus, 50% crit to everything. To your encounter powers, your daily, your at-wills, it's just everything. Now, with that being said, though, that does cater itself more to a daily spam build, which would be something like the Sigil of the Devoted, not necessarily the Wheel. However, you can see that you can hit extremely hard with it, Basically, I've already done 30 million damage. Now, granted, the Pally, the Guardian Fighter, and even the DCs here are doing a lot of damage. And I believe, I could be mistaken on this, but I believe the crit severity cap is around 200%. So I'm definitely hitting that cap with this Vorpal enchantment active. And of course that only helps on a crit, so you do need to make sure that you have your companion's gift before you use your hardest hitting powers. Otherwise, if your crit chance is a little less than 100%, you may not actually crit with it. And of course each boss in each dungeon will be a little bit different, and Hades being a pain and not letting us actually target him. So I'll get my arcane, get my buff, and try and call that down on him soon enough. He should be dead as soon as he hits the ground. There we go. Alright, so it went from 93 million to 142 million. Basically 50 mil there, which for this group is pretty good. Now, ideally, you would want to switch your loadout back for these next two spots, and you would switch back to AoE, switching your enchantment as well. And I am going to do that here because I will be switching to the Bilethorn enchantment for the next boss fight, for the second boss fight, just to kind of give a bit of comparison. Doing this is not necessarily recommended because you do go ahead and burn a crap ton of gold, 3.5 gold, every single time you do that. Now, ideally, you don't want to use the Bilethorn enchantment in this AoE environment. It's only meant to really be in single target. I am just equipping it to save one less change for the purposes of this video. At the end of the day, I would say it really depends upon what group you're running with. If you are running with a super OP buff group, at the end of the day, you might want to run the Bilethorn, especially if you're running a high power, low crit build. But if you are running with just an average buff team and you already have high crit, looks like the Vorpal would actually be better. Now, this may be different for different classes. So far, the highest class that I have to test on is my wizard. And of course, that can be different for other classes. You might have different results with it, which is up to you. This is more just for the information for end game or close to end game players, just as a for instance knowledge out there, without an actual DPS meter to test this on console. I can't say for 100% certainty which is actually going to give you more damage, because we don't have exact numbers from the enchantments. We can only eyeball things. But generally speaking, if you have the AD for a Transcendent Bilethorn, you are probably at the point that you're going to be running with mostly high-end buff groups. And if you're running with those high-end buff groups, the Bilethorn is probably the way to go for your single target damage. That's at least just what my testing so far has come to. Now, of course, I haven't been able to test every single dungeon and every single possible team comp out there. As a general rule, though, this is what has worked pretty well. And Bilethorn isn't bad in AoE damage, but I did lose around 20% of my damage from lightning, like from using a lightning for actual AoE. So I wouldn't use the Vorpal and I wouldn't use the Bilethorn for AoE builds. Which means you need to have like a second set of weapons or a second set of weapon enchantments at the very least, and be swapping between the two when you're swapping your loadouts. And this is done with only a potion of heroism and a potion of dragon slaying on. This is not done with a full pot setup. If I was potting up to the max, it would probably again help with Edge Bile Thorn. Again, if you really want to min-max Edge Bile Thorn, then I would actually recommend swapping the Wheel of Elements for the Eye of the Giant, because the Eye of the Giant increases your power, and everything that increases your power is going to increase the damage that that Bile Thorn enchantment does. Not that any of the enchantments really aren't usable, it's just a matter of which one you feel is going to be the absolute best. Now, personally, I don't want to change all of my enchantments over from build to build. You might eventually, at some point in the game, get to the point that you have so many rank 12s that you could make a loadout for AoE low random groups, and then you could make a loadout for AoE buff groups as well. So there is that potential. It probably wouldn't happen right away, considering I don't even have that yet. And then I'll switch back to... couldn't switch that power. Let me switch it real quick. There we go. Still using the relic weapon set. It's the set that I feel is the best. And we'll see how much damage I have going into the dragon turtle fight. The gears remain the same. The only thing that I change is the 2 powers to single target, and then basically the enchantment. And the amount of damage that you do will vary depending upon the group that you're with. I'm with a pretty strong group, actually a really strong group, so everybody is dealing a lot more damage. This isn't just me as the sole DPS. Make sure your companion's active, and 209 million going into the dragon turtle. So we'll see how much damage I deal in this fight. Remember, this fight will be using the Bile Thorn, not the Vorpal. The Vorpal also, I believe, would be better the higher your recovery is, and if you don't want to switch and stack power as opposed to stacking crit. The Bile Thorn is more for stacking power and super buff groups, whereas the Vorpal is more for just overall general use. It's a good enchantment, and it doesn't really rely on having to have a super OP team or having to have a super OP amount of power. Like, actually, if you were using the Owlbear Cub with a full power, low crit loadout, and the Bile Thorn in a full buff group, that would probably give you the absolute most damage. Now, from my 100 and something damage, 100 and something million damage, I believe, I'm up to 240 million. I already forgot off the top of my head how much damage I had when I started this. And remember, I can still make improvements to my character. My character is not 100% end game, you know, every single thing best in slot yet. So your performance with the enchantments may vary depending upon the enchantment that you're using. Now, that time I was able to melt him a little bit faster with the Bile Thorn on. And translation, 281 million damage at the end of the dungeon. Or at the end of that fight. So I think I did about 80 million damage in that fight. Now, there are variables as to like who gets attacks off first and just how the buffs stack up and everything. But I would say, as a general rule of thumb, the Bile Thorn is better. Like, both enchantments are the same. Vorpal, Bile Thorn, both 10% increase over lightning. However, depending upon the group, the better the buffs, edge Bile Thorn. The random groups, or just, you know, say mid-tier groups that aren't buffing your power to insane heights, the better the Vorpal is, if you have the crit. Now, if you really wanted to, you could do like an all-power, extremely low crit build just to maximize the potential. Like, that could be your super uber, like, top few percent player build if you really wanted to do that. I am getting hit way more than I should be running through here. Alright, now let's see, in this boss fight, I know I only did one boss fight with the Vorpal, but that's because I actually don't like the Vorpal as much as the Bile Thorn. I just really think it depends upon the group that you're running with. So I'm going in with 283 million damage done. And Knuckles is also a DPS tank. So keep in mind, he is taking some of the potential damage from the dungeon. Also, I am not using my Eye of the Giant. I am actually using my wheel for the damage bonus. Even though with this super buff team, I believe that the Eye would probably give me a couple extra K power, therefore a few extra K on every damage, every hit. And he should keel over. Yep, done. Now, that fight actually went faster than the previous run that I did using the Vorpal the entire way. And I went from 283 million to 361 million. So about 80 million damage. Which is, with this particular group, about 10%, actually. 10% more than what I did with the Vorpal. Total of about 20% more than what I would do just keeping the lightning on. At the end of the day, I believe it is entirely personal preference and entirely up to you and which group you're actually running with, what kind of group you're running with, to determine which enchantment is best. Whether it be the Transcendent Vorpal or the Transcendent Bile Thorn, whichever one suits your fancy better and your playstyle better. Remember, the Bile Thorn scales with power, the Vorpal is just a straight damage bonus. And that straight damage bonus can sometimes be better, especially with lower groups. In either case, it is a great, fantastic idea to have one of those two enchantments for your single target build. So, thanks to Krogan for letting me borrow these two enchantments to test and make this video. Also for putting together the group. He's pretty fantastic, so shout out to him. And hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, make sure you leave a comment. Otherwise, remember to smash the like button, share the video with a friend, and of course, subscribe for more content. Until next time, stay frosty.